Tommy, let us welcome into the show the economist from the CTU, podcaster extraordinaire from Locked Out. It is Craig Renney. Good evening, sir.
Good evening. How are you, gents?
Doing good. Oh my gosh, where's this? I'm a bit freaked out that there's no kind of shirt and suit jacket on. Is this like Economists After Dark or something? What are we looking at?
It's a special kind of Patreon. The phrase niche doesn't even begin to cover it. Can I suggest the name of the group that you were looking for, which is the JDS community, which is the Jacinda derangement syndrome.
I see what you did there. That's not bad, actually. I know this is taken from Trump, but that's not bad. I'm thinking, but look, honestly, I wrote that tweet today, and I didn't want to use the word cookers. I mean, I don't mind offending people. It's kind of my MO, but I don't feel the need to all the time. How do we identify this group of people who are still today talking about microchips and myocarditis, and like they're still doing it today? And how do we identify them? Because if you go, oh, you're a fucking conspiracy theory lunarist wanker. I'm using an extreme example of a name for them, although it may be accurate. Then you're getting to a conversation of, well, you're just calling us names. That's the only way you can win. It's like, I don't want to necessarily be respectful, but I don't think name calling necessarily helps either. Sometimes it's fun. It might not hurt, but yeah, I don't. That's not bad. So the JDS. That sounds like a religion.
It's sort of it's a slightly nicer word than lost. Lost. Community, because it suggests that these people will never come back.
That's not bad. Lost isn't bad. I heard from some of the lost today. That's not bad. That's not bad, actually. All right, Craig. This is Tommy, by the way. Tommy, this is Craig.
Craig, nice to meet you.
You too.
You and I didn't. I mean, I was there. Recorded a podcast yesterday, which is up on YouTube and Facebook, and of course Apple and Spotify, as well as it goes other places as well. Other places grab the RSS and it sends it off to themselves, but they're the main places we put it. About the electricity sector. Now, I'm quite interested in this Treasury conversation, and I've kind of teased we're going to talk about that. But before we do, sorry, they're all coming up with names now, and they're always funnier than ours. You ready? Talentless oxygen thieves. So TOT. There you go. TOTs, the tots. Oh, don't mind that either. I'm jotting that one down. The tots. TOT. Okay. Sorry, I'm back again. Can we maybe give people a bit of a nutshell, a bit of an elevator pitch, a bit of a, and I'm not, I'm not saying literally in 60 seconds or less, but to explain what's happening in the electricity sector at the moment, what you guys are putting out, because it seems to me that there's a lot of stuff going on. There's what the CTU has done. There's what you guys are talking about. There's some recommendations made that the government's ignoring. It's all very kind of blurry at the moment. Can we bring it back into focus? I'm sure everyone else understands, but maybe just for me. Maybe I just need a bit of a hand.
Well, if anybody does understand, I'd love to hear them, because, to be frank, there's a lot going on in this space. First things first, electricity pricing is, frankly, out of control. So electricity prices went up 11.4% on average last year, and they've gone up over the past 3 years just shy of 20%. Now, that's an enormous leap. A big part of that problem is that we're not generating any new electricity. So we generate the same amount of electricity we generated 10 years ago, 44,000 gigawatts a year, right? And it's roughly the same amount of electricity, renewables, as it is everything else, as it was 10 years ago. Nothing much has changed, except the population has gone up by 1 million, except the economy is 30% in real terms bigger. And so that electricity is having to go further and further, and it's getting more expensive, which means that the average New Zealander uses 13% less electricity than they did 10 years ago.
But part of that's a good thing, eh? Part of that's like because we've got better fridges, we've got more economical heat pumps, So part of that is also natural attrition, that we're using less, because it does sound very strange to think about our population has gone up by 1 million out of 5 million, so 20%, yet we are using almost on the dime the same amount of electricity every single year.
And the challenge here is that you did right. So some of our devices become more energy efficient, and that's fabulous. But we also have more electric vehicles. Over the past 10 years, the number of battery electric vehicles in New Zealand has gone up 10,000%. Right? We use more heat pumps, so there's less wood being used, there's less gas being used. So there would be a home for the electrons in the system if the electricity was cheaper.
Right.
It's one of the laws of economics, that Say's law in economics, supply creates the demand, is that you will, if there was cheap electricity, people would be able to turn the heating on. They'd be able to have the lighting. They'd be able to do the things that they're currently not able to afford to do. And roughly, electricity is about twice as expensive on a quarterly basis in Auckland as it is in the state of Victoria. And that pricing is crazy when you think about it, because our electricity is renewable, on the majority. It's essentially, it's delivering a much smaller population. And what's really happening here is that lack of generation is essentially deindustrializing the economy. So we're seeing the loss of pulp and paper producers. We're seeing the loss of industry. We're seeing the loss of manufacturing in New Zealand. Manufacturing is down in output terms to where it was in 2015.
So are we seeing therefore a drop off in manufacturing and like business energy, and a picking up in residential, and that means it evens itself out? Is that what's happening?
Yeah, exactly. So what you're seeing is household electricity usage is remaining roughly the same. However, if I took pulp and paper production, for example, that's fallen 70% in terms of electricity use. If I took chemicals production, the electricity going into that has fallen 50% over the past 10 years. That's not because those industries have had a productivity revolution and they're suddenly so much more efficient. They're just using less electricity.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that we're seeing in New Zealand is we're losing jobs. We can see jobs being lost on an almost weekly basis now in New Zealand as a consequence of electricity costs. Households can't afford to put the heating on, yet the big four gentailers are still handing out enormous dividends to their shareholders. And over the past few years, research from the CTU and from my colleague Ed Miller at SICTAR, who's done some fabulous work, he has helped show that over the past 10 years, the amount of investment in new generation has collapsed. It was 1.6 billion in 2011, and that fell to 225 million. And then it stayed there for a really long time. And every year since partial privatization, we have invested less than the dividends taken out by shareholders. So something is wrong in our electricity system. We can't get new generation. The reason electricity is so expensive is because we create artificial scarcity.
Mm-hmm.
We create that artificial scarcity, which keeps Huntly coal-fired power station on, because the last unit of electricity sets the price for everybody else.
Right.
That Huntly being on is obviously giantly, terrible from a climate perspective, because we're burning Indonesian coal to keep Huntly going. And everybody gets the benefit of that incredibly expensive last unit of electricity. Now, if we supplied more renewable energy and we didn't need to put Huntly on, you can see the pricing would suddenly fall. Because Huntly is the most expensive electricity in the country.
I want to just show you. You've already explained this, but I thought go and check out Craig's podcast, right, to get all the information. But just to show people what you were talking about, this dotted line here was Mr. Key partial privatization. Yep. So basically 50-50. This orange line is the dividends that these companies were giving back to us because the government owned. Before it, these dividends are what they're giving back. I guess you'd still have to be accurate and say half of these dividends are coming to to us, and half is going privately.
it's hard. It's more than that as well, Pat, because we also get the GST on the bills,
Right.
And we get some money from the distribution grid, which isn't the gentailers. So overall, the government is getting about $1 billion a year in revenue from the electricity system.
But in a layman's point of view, you'll correct me here because that's your job. What it says to me is, we could, if we still own them all, we could either choose to knock half of this dividend off and therefore drop the price, or invest that half of dividend into the systems to make them better, into the infrastructure and stuff. Is that a fair way of thinking? Because you can see here, this is the investment, and this is what the government invested, and then once it's sold, investment dipped, went away, and it's obviously, I would say they've gone, holy shit, we're 15 years behind on our grid, so we better invest again. And so they've been investing again. But I look at this and I think, give or take, half of this dividend is not going to benefit us, New Zealanders, because it's going to the private consumer, or benefit the government, which is still benefiting us and the infrastructure. Is that fair?
That's absolutely right. Essentially, before partial privatization, we were investing more than we took out. After partial privatization, we're taking more out than we invest in.
Yeah, and of course, what happens is, like, if you've got your car and you don't spend any money on the car, keeping it, you're not spending any money on your car because you're just letting it continue to work a year, and then all of a sudden everything goes wrong. It's like, shit, big investment to get my car going again because you've spent nothing on it. Through that 3, 5, 10 year period, you just let it kind of go and change the oil occasionally, and then you have lots of problems because everything fails at the same time.
You've met my carbon, but in terms of the overall system, you're dead right. Essentially, where we've underinvested for years, or the generators have underinvested for years, shareholders have made huge profits on the way through, and now we're facing a crunch because we need more generation. We need more renewable generation. We certainly need more renewable generation in the future if we're going to manage climate change. But yet we're managing that on the back of shedding jobs and poorer households not having the electricity that they need at a price they can afford, which means colder houses, which means we all pay more in health costs, we pay more in housing costs, we pay more in every other way. So that's there's real life consequences to this.
Craig, I should shut up now, and we should invite Tommy into the conversation because you and I have been gasbagging for so long. Tommy, you got a question or comment around the electricity stuff for Craig, and then we'll go on to the part about Treasury.
Yeah, sure. So, thank you for that, Craig. I appreciate it. This isn't a topic I'm particularly well versed in, but I knew we were talking about it tonight, so I did read a couple of articles and took in what I can. A lot of it goes over my head, though, I'm not going to lie. But I guess was there an instant recently where Christopher Luxon had denied a bill going through on renewable energy or something along those lines?
There's been a few changes where they've essentially got rid of needs to generate certain amounts of renewable energy, and they've certainly got rid of a lot of the price transparency in the space. We at the CTU have a really simple solution, and he says, because he's got a prop, and it's this one here. Which is hang
on. We did this for Deb last night when she held a book up. Ready? There you go. Show us your prop. There we go. You got a prop.
Publicly owned energy. So essentially, we take this problem and we make the electricity system publicly owned again. We take the profits that we're making from the energy companies and we use that to buy back all the shares.
Love that.
So it doesn't cost us anything. The companies now face the right incentives. If the companies make really big dividends, then guess what? They go back into public ownership faster. If they choose to make smaller dividends and make more investment in generation, which benefits everyone, we're all better off. So that's our proposal. And in the short run, direct those companies instead of generating huge profits to say, our goal as the largest shareholder in those three big firms is for you to generate new renewable, cheap electricity for our country. And importantly, to stop seeing electricity as a center of profit and to start seeing it as what it is, which is a public utility. It's just like water. We should be using it as a tool of economic development, as a tool of industrial policy, to make sure that households, that vulnerable people, can have the heating on when they need it, not just when the electricity market says it's okay. And so that's our key objective here, is to say, how can we bring this back into public ownership and get the kind of control we used to have, and then from that control get the better outcomes that we need? Because otherwise we're going to see provincial towns across this country losing good, well-paid jobs because the owners will walk because they can't pay the electricity bill.
Nice. So it's essentially just moving away from privatization back to the public
and treating it as a utility, right?
Yeah.
And that's the thing, is that instead of it being something where a market where we go, how do we create supply and demand? How do we deliver a profit margin out of this? We say, how do I make sure there's enough electricity in the system at a reasonable price so that everybody can benefit from that electricity provision?
Cool.
Have you crunched the numbers? Because I would think, someone's put in the chat, I think it was Dave, that they took 1.4 billion in dividends out last year. So let's keep that 50% margin. That means it's 700 million to the private consumer, 700 million to us, whatever. To buy a business worth $700 million, you might pay 4x. There might be a $4 billion sale for $700 million worth of profit. So you say use the dividends to buy it back, but it wouldn't just be 1 year of dividends to buy that back. What would be the formula? So what would be the formula for buying it back? Have you done those numbers?
So it depends on how quickly the companies go back into the system, because if you take faster dividends at the beginning, then they get back into the system faster. It's about $13 billion that you would need to buy them back all in. But it's funny because it's not a linear, it's not a straight line, because it's compound. It sort of goes up in a hockey stick. And so it depends upon how quickly you choose to do it. You might choose not to use all of the money of all the shares in 1 year, for example, or you might choose to make strategic decisions to ask them to invest in new generation rather than just buying the shares back in 1 year.
I mean, you know, there could be hypothetically a government that gave away 14 billion in tax cuts. There could be a government that would reorientate that back and have it paid off within 4 years. That would be it's just an idea. I know it's a bit off the top of the dome, but crazy out there, crazy thinking. All right, Craig, listen, we've probably held you longer than we should, but quickly give us this heads up about what's happening with Treasury. There's a lockup that's not a lockup, and then why is this happening?
So for the real ultra fans of fiscal policy, there's we all are. It's a burden. But in terms of there's three fiscal events in the year: the budget, economic and fiscal update, or the budget, the half-year update, which happens at Christmas time, and then the financial statements of government, and that happens about now in October, and that tells us what's happened with the audited accounts of the government over the past year. So these are the true and final accounts of the government. Now, all three of those have had lockups, where the Minister of Finance, Treasury officials turn up and tell you what's happened in these books, tell you what's going to happen in the economy, and tells you what the numbers mean. Now, the Treasury has decided...
So hang on, just pause for me. Just like in business, you get told by senior business people to spend tomorrow's money. Yesterday's money. What am I talking about? Tomorrow's money hasn't come in yet. Today's money is arriving, but yesterday's money is in the bank and you can spend it. It sounds like what you're saying is when you say it's at the end of this is no projections. This is actually what has happened. And so this is concrete. This will be concrete numbers. There'll be no negotiation of what these numbers say and mean. This is yesterday's money. It's done. It's there. It's the analogy. It's in the bank. Those invoices have been paid. Those budgets have been, and that's all done. So there's no sort of like projection in the future. This could happen, or this is actual concrete data.
Yep. So the Auditor General has signed off these accounts. Okay. And we get to see what's really happened. So the budgets give us forecasts. This is what we think is going to happen. The audited accounts tell us what really has happened. The government's financial year runs in funny years. So, most companies run April 1st to April the 1st. Mm-hmm. The government runs 1st of July to 1st of July. So the fiscal year, as we call it, which is why we get the end accounts in October, because it takes from the end of July to the first start of July to October to finalize all of the accounts.
Right.
Now, normally, we'd all get to sit in a very boring room at the Treasury. Yeah, genuinely, it's not a fantastic space. They don't even put on biscuits. This is not a lavish affair. However, that's God's honest truth. But they generally hold a lockup. Treasury officials come in and tell us what's in the accounts. The Secretary of the Treasury will give us a set of some facts and figures about what's occurred. Will tell us if there's been anything funny that the Auditor General's gone, hang on a second, what about this? And then the Minister of Finance will often come in and say, hey, this is how I interpret these accounts. Thank you very much. And then we all get to ask Treasury officials questions and then write up what's going to happen. The analysis part, that front part from the Treasury, from Minister of Finance, or anybody else, that's all gone. So
there's no lockup. So normally you'd go in 2 hours early. You'd have all the data in front of you. You'd be like, nobody can take their phone to the toilets, that kind of stuff, all secret squirrel. And you as an analyst and an economist are being so excited because it's the best day of the year for you, flicking through pages, working things out, saying, hey, what about this? And then making your analysis of what you're seeing, ready to release that once the embargo is up, like you and I have done at like 11 o'clock in the morning on a live stream. So you've done that. Okay, so that's not happening.
So what's not happening is the Treasury's there's no presentations, there's no information on the Treasury. Okay. So you can still go into a room and read the accounts. That's fine. You can still, but what there isn't is an opportunity to hear from the Minister of Finance or from the Treasury what they think. Right.
So, do you still have that? But do you still have that lockup 2 hours before embargo's over?
Well, 1 hour before the thing. But essentially, what there isn't is no statement from the Minister of Finance.
Why does that matter? Why is that a big deal?
What we're not getting, essentially, this is one less piece of information from the minister. The minister's not fronting at the time the accounts are produced. I can't imagine a CFO of any of the NZX 50, not a chief finance officer of any of the NZX 50 firms, not turning up when they put out their annual accounts. Right? Okay. That is bog standard. Right? The Treasury's not turning up and telling you what any of it means. And essentially what's not really happening is the space where journalists and analysts get together and talk to each other for a bit about what's really in the accounts, what's really going on, right? And that's the problem that we have, is that there's now less information in the system than there was. And it's just part of that, how do I put it, that cheapening of the public realm, where we get less information, we get less data, or we get told less by politicians and experts, and we have less ability to interpret what's really going on with a really important set of accounts.
It's important to notice, though, that there's kind of a demarcation of a line between Treasury and Nicola Willis. So that's Treasury not doing. You could say Nicola Willis can do whatever she wants, even if it's not cricket, she can not turn up. But Treasury not doing what Treasury normally does. Do you think that's because they've had an instruction to do that? Or like, why would Treasury, who are supposedly independent, not do what Treasury normally does?
Well, it's really difficult to say without, I'm certainly not going to start putting on a tinfoil hat or joining the JDS brigade and saying that, that it's kind of, that they're all in it, they're all against you, right? The Treasury's official advice is that it was due to a lack of demand. Now, we've had a lack of demand for a long time, right? It's a room, right, with some people in it. It's not hard, right? And also, if the Treasury doesn't have a job of communicating the accounts, I literally don't know what its job is. Yeah. So there's kind of there's a real challenge here, and again, it's just that cheaply debate. But what I would say is that there's a confluence of things that makes you think, right? So today, for those watchers in Wellington, the front page of the Post had the Treasury Secretary Ian Renney on the front page, telling everyone there was no money, and sounding an awful lot like the Minister of Finance. and telling everyone that public servants needed to rein it in a bit and that we needed more financial management, right? And it sounded an awful lot like a politician, which, as a former Treasury official, right, I can tell you made me jump, because former Treasury bosses have never gone public with this sort of thing. It is the antithesis of what Treasury secretaries do. Treasury secretaries advise the Minister of Finance. They don't advise the public, right? There's a much more there's a more politicized edge to the kinds of things that used to be pretty straight in New Zealand.
I've got one more question to wrap this up, but again, Tommy, this is, I mean, this is lots of information in kind of Craig's world, but is there anything in there that you've heard that you want to pull out or expand on or double check on or something?
I mean, in respect of the Treasury stuff, like my first instinct hearing about that was, it sounds quite Trumpian almost, but I guess what I wanted to ask was, you know, with the when the Treasury comes through and does the presentation like they normally would you have like an opportunity to respond or ask questions and things like that usually? Or
exactly.
Okay,
exactly.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, and instead they just want you to sit down and read it, and then you can't, you know, you don't have the opportunity to say anything.
And they get first bite at the narrative. They get the opportunity to essentially put out the information first without having had any of that conversation. Now, I just want to make sure, because in the chat, Pat, Loki's mum has asked, am I and Ian Renney related? And I can tell you we're not. Our surnames are spelt differently, even though they sound very similar. But in terms of this story, my concern is just that we're getting little bits of the information keep being removed. Earlier this year, we removed all the information about electricity margins, right? So we no longer know how much profit electricity companies were making when they were generating electricity. We've removed information about the child poverty measurement. So the Child Poverty Reduction Act requires us to produce information on child poverty numbers. The book that has that has gone down from about 20 pages down to 3. And we've just got rid of all of the information about what the government's doing about child poverty. And
far out.
There's all of these different areas where it's just it's that cheapening of the public debate, so that the government can get its message out, and that's it. There's no actual information to have a better conversation.
Yeah, so that was I was doing 3 things at once here, but just checking into what you've just said there as well. The press conference that there's no analysts at, is that what we're talking about as well?
Well, certainly there's no statement from the Minister of Finance and there's no statement from the Treasury telling us things that we can then question, because it's just, here's the book, now go away.
Yeah. Look, if I hadn't have got a message from the ghost who lags, I'd be concerned. But the ghost who lags has done a superb chat, and we have to mention it after you talked about your no bickies. The ghost who lags says, Nikki, no cakes. And I think, you know, that's top. I mean, like, for all these problems we've had, without this conversation, we would not be having that top tier comedy right now. So it's almost worth it. Almost. Not quite, but almost. No, but in all seriousness, Craig, what does that mean? You guys the government's going to have its narrative out before you guys get to analyse it, and you're going to follow along 2 hours later and have to try and break through the, what do you call it? The flooding the zone that the government will be doing with these numbers to make sure that they get their narrative out first.
Pretty much. And we'll all be working with less information, and we'll all be working with less insight. And that doesn't help anyone. And particularly in something as complicated as the annual accounts. And so the challenge that we face is that it's not so much now. The government will be what the government does, right? What I'm really concerned about is how we rebuild that trust and that information in the public system. Because it's only when we rebuild that trust and that information in the public system, people will feel confident that their government's actually working for them. And it's the stripping away that information is actually part of what's causing people to lose trust in government and causing us to lose trust in the institutions we all rely upon in New Zealand.
Yep.
Craig, thank you for giving up some more time. If people want to dive more into the electricity stuff, the podcast Locked Out with Craig Renney is on Apple. It's on Spotify. It's on YouTube. If you're watching us on YouTube on the Big Hairy Network, it's on this network, and it's on the Big Hairy Network Facebook page as well. You should go check it out. Because I tell you what, if nothing else, there's at least 3 more graphs, and you saw how good that last graph was, and there's like 3 more. So it's worth getting into. All right, Craig. Hey, thank you for coming on. We appreciate you giving us some of your time, and we'll touch base again super soon.
All right. Thanks so much, gents. Have a great night.
All the best.
See you later.
Night.